Why is trans discourse always centered around trans women, and never trans men? Because men are seen as a generalized threat to women and not the other way around. I wonder if it's also that men just don't care. If a guy goes into a girl's bathroom, you get all sorts of shrieks and comments. If a girl goes into a guy's bathroom, they just don't seem to care. The same people making this noise believe men and male sexuality are inherently predatory. So they believe a trans woman, who to them is still a man, in a woman's space is dangerous. But a trans man, to them, still a woman, in a man's space is not. Generally, I think it's that trans men are just thought of as masculine or butch women. Women like that have been around forever and are not considered threatening. 1. Trans men tend to completely become male without anyone giving them a second glance. They become and are, typically, masculine. Period. 2. Cisgender males, generally, are unconcerned about trans males using male restrooms. 3. Cisgender males don't consider trans males to be a threat in any sense. 4. Nobody expresses any concern about trans males molesting children or women. Because society views women as being the weaker sex. This is something that has been taught to us historically and even today. That perception is still enforced, including by non-misogynists. So the debate around trans women is to protect what we view as the weaker sex. It's seen as potentially predatory when it comes to women's spaces, and that you've started with a much greater physical advantage when it comes to things like sports. The segregation of sexes is largely to protect women and give them their own opportunities rather than protecting or giving advantages to men. Trans men, however, for lack of a better term, have to prove themselves. If a trans man wants to play on the men's team, they have to demonstrate ability which is viewed as having been earned. You've worked to get to this level instead of just using an advantage that nature gives you. If you want to put yourself in men's spaces, then you clearly feel comfortable and confident enough to do so. You've overcome your vulnerabilities, for lack of better phrasing. Because biological men are not threatened or as uncomfortable by biological women in their spaces. Biological women don't pose nearly as much of a threat competing in male sports as men competing in women's sports. To play devil's advocate, I don't think any man is concerned about a trans man abusing him in the restroom. Whereas a trans woman is going to be physically stronger than most every woman. Obviously, because women are more vulnerable than men are. No one is worried about trans men in sports because their performance output is starting at a level below that of men. On the other hand, trans women are starting at a level above that of women, as one example of many. Honestly, because the same people aren't ready to have a discussion about what it means to be a man. They are also unprepared to talk about male privilege, or how differently males are treated than women. As a whole, people aren't ready to look at how we came to these gender roles or how made up it all is. Hate aimed at trans men can sometimes be the more subtle, insidious sort, the sort allowed to fly under the radar or that rarely gets called out for the vileness it is. Rather than overt, pitchforks and slurs type hate, erasure and invisibility are part of the problems many trans men face. For example, most of the debate I've seen around allowing access to medical transition has been about young trans men. But transphobic media reports it as being about teen girls. The fact that they're men is scrubbed out entirely. Trans men are typically more often painted by transphobes as tragic victims who need to be saved, rather than portrayed as predators. Most of the trender scaremongering, most of the push to prevent access to means of medically transitioning, And almost all of the debates I've seen about legal parenthood status I've seen has been about trans men and transmasc people. There is a lot of hate aimed at trans men which gets swept under the carpet or reframed to be about other groups. The cases of high-profile transphobes calling anyone who menstruates women, or the drama about less overtly feminine sanitary products was specifically misgendering trans men and transmasc NB people, as while it can be implied they don't think people who don't menstruate could be women. In the cases I can think of, that wasn't what was said, but I get the impression that far fewer people ever actually stick up for or openly support trans men. Because of transmasculine erasure, all the stuff about transing our youth, and mutilating children's bodies, and blue heron pronouns, such are all about trans men, but it's not perceived as it because it's framed as being about teenage girls, young women's bodies, and often even other transgender people take it at face value that these people are female and don't make the connection that they're actually abusing transmasculine youth. Because no biological woman is going to dominate men's sports. And if a woman comes into the male's bathroom, the males would likely just think IDC rather than worried about being sexually assaulted. Because a cis woman is more likely to be a victim of anything generally than a cis man. It stems from the idea that men are always predators and women are always victims, and the idea that trans women are men, trans men are women, and gender identity means nothing compared to sex at birth. Following this logic leads us to believe that trans women are actually predators trying to get into female spaces, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and trans men are victims of trans indoctrination. Because the insecure men speaking up against the trans community fear being attracted to gasp someone who was once male or who may still have male parts, as if they can be forced to be gay or something. It's not always the case, but you're right that it's disproportionately the case. So the reason is, trans discourse is made up. It's all manufactured. Neo-Nazi groups, such as the ones who did a Hitler salute on the Victorian Parliament steps a few months back, have joined a hate campaign against trans people because it's useful. The public face, so to speak, of this hate campaign, known as both trans-exclusionary radical feminism and gender-critical, is to pretend it's feminism. Mind you, this is in line with the 14 words creed about protecting the sanctity of the white woman. Yada yada. To pretend that it's feminism, they need to depict women as the victims of trans people existing. So their main thing is to pretend that trans people who'll exist in the same spaces as cis women, i.e. trans women, are Satan, or perverts, or dangerous. They also say that trans men are confused girls, or autistic lesbians, being groomed, abused, damaged, by the dangerous trans women. Any likeness to historical blood libel is on purpose. They're Nazis and Nazi sympathizers. They also use the clout and money they get, often from far-right American churches, to go after any woman who does not follow their ideals. For instance, intersex black women. What it comes down to is just traditional fascism, really. But the main recruiting tactic of fascists has changed. It's now a manufactured culture war. Read genocide attempt. But with popular support garnered through Fox News, focused on picking one minority group nobody was prepared to defend and hitting them all the time. There's a lot to be said about what could naturally account for a difference. People perceive masculine as the default, leaving masculinity as a betrayal. If they perceive trans women as men and trans men as women, then there could be a bit of the same effect as in, lesbians I don't care, but the gays I hate, and so on. But overwhelmingly the forks and torches crowd has just grabbed an almost acceptable public face to drag people to fascism. Lots of reasons already covered. But one I haven't seen here yet is that being a man is seen by Western culture as aspirational, whereas being a woman is seen by Western culture as a weakness. Therefore, a person assigned female who identifies as a man is seen as a sign of strength of character and achievement, whereas a person assigned male who identifies as a woman is seen as weak and a perversion of Western values. For lots of screwed up reasons. Western culture values being a man, and does not value being a woman. Transphobia is often affected by the tropes of misogyny. Toxic masculinity says that any man who violates masculinity is wrong, perverted, mentally ill, etc. This trope was slung at gay men a lot, too. There must be something wrong with them, lump them in with other undesirables. They're all dangerous RPISTS. Trans women existing is seen as a personal affront to the masculinity of men everywhere. So it's everyone's problem. On the other hand, trans men are often infantilized. A lot of bills blocking HRT target trans men because they're just confused women who don't know better. They're seen as misguided lesbians with internal misogyny that made them think they're men. Still seen as wrong, but this time with an "I can fix them" white knight-esque slant. Misogyny is the reason women are thought of as inferior. Trans women don't make sense to people with conservative values because 1. They don't understand what does being a transgender mean. They think it's wanting to change one's sex or gender. 2. They can't wrap their head around that people, born male, would want to be women. Their position that men are superior is threatened by existence of trans women. Even if consider cis people. Cis men wearing feminine clothing would be frowned upon, while it's easier for people to accept cis women wearing masculine clothing. They can easily understand why a woman would want to be masculine, as they consider it a better gender.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.